Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Steve Koleno, and this is Confidential Remarks. What I want to show you today is not another brokerage pitch, another lead generation platform, or another marketing gimmick. This is a systems update. For decades, real estate has operated with outdated rules, hidden incentives, and information asymmetry that leaves consumers at a disadvantage during one of the biggest financial decisions of their lives. What we're proposing with open access is simple. Install a fair play standard into the industry itself. Think about this presentation like patch notes for a major software update. We're identifying the bugs, removing the exploits, and replacing confusion with transparency. Because the future of real estate will not belong to the loudest salesperson. It will belong to the clearest, most trustworthy advisor. And today, I'm going to show you exactly how that system works. The uncomfortable truth is that most consumers enter real estate negotiations with less information than everyone else involved. Fees are often buried in fine print. Critical market data is gatekept. And many consumers don't actually know who their advisor is truly working for. Imagine sitting down at a poker table where every other player can see the cards except you. That's how the average buyer or seller experiences real estate today. The system rewards opacity because opacity creates leverage. Consumers are told to trust the process while the process itself remains hidden from them. And when information is uneven, power becomes uneven. That's the core issue open access is designed to solve. Not by asking people to be better, but by redesigning the rules so transparency becomes mandatory instead of optional. If there's one issue that perfectly represents the structural flaw in real estate, it's dual agency. Dual agency asks one advisor to represent both sides of the same negotiation. But that creates an impossible contradiction. You cannot aggressively negotiate the lowest price for the buyer while simultaneously negotiating the highest price for the seller. That's not advocacy. That's conflict management. The easiest way to understand it is this. Imagine a referee secretly betting on both teams, or a lawyer trying to represent both the plaintiff and the defendant at the same time. No one would accept that in sports, law, or finance. Yet in real estate, it has become normalized. Open access removes that conflict entirely. One advisor, one side, one fiduciary responsibility, because trust only works when loyalty is clear. Open access is not a brokerage. It's not a discount app. And it's not a marketing campaign. It is a public, auditable standard designed to force transparency into the real estate process. Think of it like building codes for housing or accounting standards for finance. The goal is consistency, visibility, and consumer protection. The system introduces 3 major upgrades. First, a visible advisor rating system that consumers can actually understand. Second, clear engagement pathways so people know exactly what level of service they're paying for. And third, complete data symmetry, meaning consumers can see the same market information their advisor sees. No hidden dashboards, no mystery process, no fog of war. The objective is simple. Remove ambiguity so consumers can make decisions with confidence. These 8 standards are the operational backbone of the system. The first category focuses on protecting consumers financially. No dual agency, full fee clarity, and a written commitment that the advisor is acting in the client's best interest. Those aren't marketing promises. They are measurable standards. The second category focuses on operational behavior. Consumers deserve clear service options, transparent data access, anti-discrimination safeguards, reliable communication, and public accountability. Notice what's important here. These standards are binary. Either an advisor complies or they do not. There's no partial transparency, no mostly ethical, no vague interpretation. The system only works if the rules are enforceable and verifiable. One of the biggest frustrations consumers face is not knowing who they can trust. The CTA score solves that problem with a standardized transparency rating from 0 to 100. This is not a popularity contest. It's not based on follower count, production volume, or branding. It's based entirely on verified compliance with the open access standards. A high score means the advisor has fully adopted transparent operating practices. A mid-range score means consumers should ask more questions before signing anything. And a low score signals elevated risk and the need for independent review. Most importantly, this creates accountability that consumers can understand instantly. Just like safety ratings in vehicles or health inspection grades in restaurants, visibility changes behavior. A transparency score only matters if people trust how it's earned. That's why open access uses a 3-step verification process. Step 1 is disclosure. Advisors submit documentation showing how they operate. Step 2 is independent audit and verification. Every claim must be backed by written agreements, fee structures, and operational evidence. And step 3 is public registry publication. The final score becomes visible, auditable, and time limited, meaning advisors must continue meeting the standards over time. This is critical because transparency cannot depend on marketing language. It has to depend on proof. A CTA score is not a slogan. It's a verified measurement. One of the biggest myths in real estate is that consumers only have one way to participate. Open Access introduces 3 clear engagement pathways. DIY is designed for consumers who want maximum control and lower costs. They receive the tools, compliance systems, and data, but they execute the transaction themselves. DWI, done with you, is collaborative. The advisor assists with negotiation and strategy while the consumer stays actively involved. And DFY, done for you, is the traditional full-service experience, but with full transparency built into the process. The key idea here is optionality. Consumers should not be forced into a one-size-fits-all commission structure. They should choose the level of support that matches their goals, budget, and experience. The old real estate model optimized for one thing: closing the deal. Not necessarily the best outcome, not necessarily long-term trust, just the transaction itself. Information became leverage. Compensation became confusing. And advisors often operated more like salespeople than fiduciaries. Fair play flips those incentives completely. The new model optimizes for consumer outcomes. Information is shared equally. Compensation is clear before engagement. And advisors operate using verifiable standards instead of pressure tactics. When transparency becomes the default, trust stops being a branding exercise and starts becoming measurable behavior. One of the most important design decisions in open access is structural separation. The standards body does not profit from transactions, and the technology provider does not control the rules. That firewall matters enormously, because whenever the regulator profits from the activity it regulates, conflicts of interest begin to emerge. So the Open Access Council exists solely to define, maintain, and enforce the standards. Meanwhile, the technology engine operates the infrastructure underneath the system. Separate incentives, separate responsibilities, separate power structures. That separation creates legitimacy. The next generation of consumer behavior will not begin with search engines. It will begin with AI assistants. People are already starting to ask systems like ChatGPT, Siri, and AI copilots for recommendations they can trust. But AI can only provide trustworthy recommendations if the underlying data is trustworthy. That's why open access is designed to be machine readable, not just human readable. Transparent standards, verified disclosures, and structured data allow AI systems to filter out bad actors automatically and elevate advisors who operate ethically. In other words, transparency becomes programmable. And in the future, the advisors who win will be the ones whose credibility can be verified instantly by both humans and machines. Transparency means nothing if it only protects certain groups of people. That's why fair housing is not treated as an optional compliance checkbox inside open access. It is foundational to the system itself. Advisors cannot bypass these standards without immediate consequences to their score and standing. In addition, AI systems and automated marketing tools are audited to identify discriminatory behavior before deployment. That matters because technology can either reduce bias or accidentally scale it. The responsibility of a modern standard is not just operational transparency, it's equitable transparency. Fairness has to exist at the code level. When transparency becomes visible, consumer behavior starts to change. Consumers begin choosing advisors with higher accountability scores. As trust increases, ethical advisors gain more market share. That pressures weaker operators either to improve or exit the market entirely. Over time, the standards themselves become normalized, and eventually transparency stops being a differentiator and becomes the expectation. That creates a self-correcting flywheel. More trust creates more adoption. More adoption creates more accountability. And more accountability improves outcomes for everyone involved. That's how industries evolve. The future of real estate will not be built on pressure, confusion, or hidden incentives. It will be built on clarity. Consumers will demand more visibility, more control, and more choice. And the advisors who thrive in that future will be the ones who embrace transparency instead of resisting it. Open access is not trying to eliminate advisors. It's trying to elevate the trustworthy ones and give consumers the tools to identify them clearly. Because ultimately, the best systems are not the ones that force trust. They're the ones that make trust visible. This has been Confidential Remarks.